Hey everybody, welcome back to Top Down Commander. Today's deck tech is a multi-headed heavy hitter from Commander 2020, Zaxara, the Exemplary. Buckle up because X gon' give it to ya. Hail Hydra Planeswalkers, welcome back to the Top Down Commander Deck Dojo. I'm your sensei, the Magus of the Salt himself. Today's deck tech has big X energy, but before we get into it, please, if you like what you see here, do all the YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the bell for notifications whenever a new video comes out. It's all free, takes just a second. With that business out of the way, let's check out the Top Down Commander for today's deck. Fresh out of Commander 2020, today's commander is Zaxara the Exemplary. Zaxara is a 2/3 Nightmare Hydra. How metal is that creature type, seriously? For 1, a black, a green, and a blue. Zaxara has Death Touch and tap, add 2 mana of any one color, and whenever you cast a spell with X in its casting cost, create a 0/0 green Hydra creature token, then put X +1/+1 counters on it. Zaxara is the newest in a line of recent legendary Hydras. Hydras are a pretty popular tribe, and there are actually a lot of factors in picking the right commander for your Hydra deck. If you're considering building a Hydra deck, I recommend checking out the companion video to this one, all about Hydras. The link is in the description, and should be somewhere on this screen. Zaxara is more concerned with casting X spells than it is just Hydras. Lucky for us, a majority of Hydras have X in their casting cost. Zax is going to contribute to our big mana plan by adding 2 mana himself and being an army in a can. So what is Sensei's strategy for this deck? We're going to make a ton of mana, cast big X spells, and use +1/+1 counter synergies to overwhelm our opponents. With the plan in place, let's check out the deck. As always, we're going to start off with our ramp and card draw packages. To keep in line with our commander, who is a mana dork, we're going to continue to run a nice mana dork package. We're going to start off with the elves that produce 1 color of mana, Llanowar, Mystic, and Deep Shadow. Then we've got some of the dorks that tap for 1 mana of any color, Birds of Paradise, Paradise Druid, Sylvan and Elysian Caryatids. Next up are the ones that add mana based on the amount of +1/+1 counters on them, Gyre Sage and Incubation Druid. And then Rishkar and Zhang turn all of our creatures with +1/+1 counters on them into mana dorks. And since most of our Hydras are going to have counters on them, that's going to make our entire board into mana dorks. Next up, we got some ways to make those mana dorks even better. Leyline of Abundance is going to allow our creatures to tap for an additional green whenever they tap for mana. Nyx Bloom Ancient will make them produce 3 times as much mana. And new from Ikoria is Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. She says whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, add 1 mana of any type that permanent produced. She's got more text, but that's the only part that's really relevant to us. Then we've got some untappers that can let us reuse our dorks on everyone's turn. Now that we're tapping for a ton of mana, let's look at some X spell ramp cards. Animist's Awakening is going to dig us X deep for lands, Nylea's Intervention can tutor up specific lands, and Mana Bloom is really cool in this deck because we can dump a ton of mana into it to make a big Hydra, then spend that mana later on throughout the turn cycle, and at our upkeep, bounce it back to our hand and re-abuse it again. So we're really only losing 1 mana in the exchange. Our draw package is of course X-based as well. Pull from Tomorrow and Finale of Revelation draw only us cards, but Stroke of Genius and Damnable Pact have the option to let target player draw cards. With enough mana, we could use this to kill an opponent. Moving on, let's take a look at the Beastie Boys and their +1/+1 counters. We start off with a host of creatures that cost X mana. Most of them are Hydras. Most of them have cool abilities, gaining us life or granting card advantage. Some make tokens or serve as removal. Others get really big or make other creatures big when they die. And then there's Walking Ballista, the Gatling gun of X-spell creatures. All of these creatures get +1/+1 counters put on them as they enter the battlefield, so let's look at some ways to abuse those counters. First up are some cards that are going to put additional +1/+1 counters on our creatures. Hardened Scales, Winding Constrictor, and Pure Imaginative Rascal. Hadana's Climb puts counters on a creature, then flips into Winged Temple of Orazca, which can double a creature's power and give it flying. Rayhan, Last of the Abzan, and the Ozolith make it to where our counters never really go away, even when our creatures do. And then there's Simic Ascendancy. Whenever we put counters on our creatures, we put that many counters on Simic Ascendancy. And if there are 20 or more counters on it at our upkeep, we just win the game. And speaking of winning the game, let's take a look at how we're going to get through with our army for damage. Zagana, Utopian Speaker, and Tusk Guard Captain give all our creatures with a +1/+1 counter on them trample. And then there's The Crowd Goes Wild. As a finisher, we can cast this for X = 0 and use it for 1 mana to give our whole board trample. Open into Wonder and Herald of Secret Streams are just going to make our creatures unblockable. And now that we've seen our giant dangerous army, let's take a look at how we're going to deal with our opponent's threats. First up, let's take care of our opponent's boards. Erebos' Intervention and Profane Command will kill indestructible creatures indiscriminately. Black Sun Zenith and Gaze of Granite are big X spell board wipes. Curse of the Swine turns our opponent's boards into 2/2 boars, and Distorting Wake is like a strictly worse Cyclonic Rift, but it's got X in the cost, so we're just going to chuck it in the pile. Counterspells are kind of like removal, right? So next up, we've got some X-style counterspells. We start off with Syncopate and Thassa's Intervention. Spellburst is really cool in this deck. It's a bad counter, but it has buyback 3, so we can recast it. And we really like recasting X spells in this deck, so again, chuck it in the pile. Speaking of X spells, let's take a look at that big splashy X energy I was talking about that's going to win us the game. Exsanguinate and Torment of Hailfire speak for themselves, and they say, gross. My personal favorite spell in this deck, personal favorite spell probably in all of Magic, is Villainous Wealth. It's an X spell, and honestly, it's the reason I'm happiest to have this commander. Playing my cards is fine, but playing yours is better. It's like the mystery box. There could be anything in there. And then there's Wildest Dreams, which can put X cards back into our hand to be used again. We're just going to get back Villainous Wealth, aren't we? Oh yeah, we are. Moving on. So, if Villainous Wealth isn't Sensei's top pick of the deck, what is it? Sensei's top pick is, drumroll please, Unbound Flourishing. Whenever we cast a permanent spell with X in the mana cost, we double the X. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery with X in the casting cost, we copy the spell. All of that value for 3 mana. If you're playing an X Spells Matter deck, this card is just gas, and inarguably the best card in your deck. I'm still pulling for Villainous Wealth though. Next up, let's check out the mana base. Okay, that's a lie, because there's nothing particularly noteworthy in this land base, so if you want to see it, check out the Architect linked for the full list. With that out of the way, let's head on over to the budget report. As always, the budget report is calculated using tcgplayer.com, optimizing our cart for even heavily played and damaged cards, because we're playing jank, and you don't have to break the bank on jank. Today's deck is going to set you back $324.05 at the time of this recording. Some of that price is driven up by the fact that Ikoria hasn't released in paper yet, so cards like Zaxara and Kinnan are up near $20. Then there's a couple of cards near 20 as well, like Hydroid Krasis, Breeding Pool, and Walking Ballista. The deck could function fine with some tweaks to the mana base and removing some of the more expensive creatures. I just replaced them with some tutors for Villainous Wealth, and then maybe some more recursion for Villainous Wealth. But that's just me. And that's the deck. Thanks for stopping by, everybody. I hope you liked what you saw. If you did, please do all that YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you want to hear my thoughts on who the best Hydra commander is, click the link in the description for all about Hydras. You can find the Architect link for this deck in the description as well. And as always, follow me on Twitter at Magus of the Salt or on Facebook at Top Down Commander. But until next time, stay safe and keep kicking ass.